So what we have here is a Target paperback novelization of Doctor Who and the Planet of Evil, written by Terrance Dicks. If you're not familiar with the Target series, these were the books that basically kept Doctor Who alive for a whole generation of fans in the 70s and 80s. The show aired once, and if you missed it, that was largely it. No streaming, no DVD box sets, no catch-up service. For a lot of viewers, particularly younger ones, these paperbacks were the archive. You found them in libraries, newsagents, second-hand bookshops, and that was your access point to stories you might never see on screen again. Terrance Dicks in particular was extraordinarily prolific within this range, dozens of these novelizations, and he had a reliable quality to his prose. Nothing showy, but clear and atmospheric and respectful of the source material. He understood what these books were for. They weren't literary experiments. They were a service to an audience that wanted the story, and he delivered the story well. This specific copy is interesting beyond just the text. It was a gift, and when you open it up, there are a few different handwritings inside, little inscriptions from previous owners. It's probably passed through 3 or 4 sets of hands. The pages have browned quite a bit. That warm yellowing you get with older paperbacks, and there is that smell, that vanilla and dust combination that anyone who reads old books will immediately recognize. The spine is still solid. Whoever owned this before took reasonable care of it. It has survived 50 years in better condition than a lot of books manage in 10. It's a document of time as much as it is a story. Before we get into the story properly, a spoiler warning. From this point on, we are going into the plot in some detail. So if you want to go in completely fresh, bookmark this, read the book, and come back. The setup is straightforward enough. A Morstrand survey team lands on Zeta Minor, a planet at the very edge of the known universe. By the time the Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith arrive in the TARDIS, 7 of the 8 crew members are dead. Nobody knows why, or at least nobody who's still alive is saying. And because the Doctor shows up exactly the wrong moment, Commander Salama decides he's the killer, locks him up, and the situation deteriorates from there. What I want to flag here, because I think it matters for how you read the whole thing, is the title, Planet of Evil. It sounds like a pulpy 70s horror premise, and on the surface it is. But the word evil is actually the wrong frame for the story, and I think that tension is part of what makes it interesting. None of the characters are doing anything malicious. The Morstrands aren't invaders pursuing territory or glory. Their sun is dying. Their civilization is running out of energy, cooling down, heading toward extinction, and they have traveled to the most dangerous and remote place in the known universe because they have run out of alternatives. That's not evil. That's desperation with nowhere left to go. And once you understand that, the whole story shifts into a different register. Even the planet itself doesn't behave like a villain. The opening line of the book tells you that the planet is alive. It reacts to intrusion the way a biological system reacts to an infection. It isn't killing people out of malice. It's defending itself. The framing of evil is a misreading, and I'd argue it's a deliberate one. A title that sets up an expectation the story then quietly dismantles. Zeta Minor sits at what the book calls the fringes of the universe, which is a concept that doesn't hold up if you apply actual physics to it. There is no edge to the observable universe where the rules change, no wall where matter behaves differently on one side. But within the internal logic of this story, and Doctor Who has always operated on its own internal logic, the planet sits precisely on a boundary between our universe of matter and a mirror universe of antimatter. And that boundary is the whole point of the story. Professor Sorenson has found what he believes is a clean, portable energy source. Canisters of glowing material that he believes can be refined and used to reignite the failing Morstrand sun. On paper, he is a hero. He is trying to save an entire civilization from a slow, cold death, and he has risked everything to do it. But the Doctor understands something Sorenson doesn't, which is that removing antimatter from that environment is not a discovery. it is a debt. Matter and antimatter annihilate each other on contact. The boundary between these two universes exists because it has to exist. Taking material from one side creates an imbalance the universe will move to correct, and the correction is not gentle. Every canister Sorenson loads onto the ship makes the situation worse. The planet's hostility toward the crew is not aggression, it is physics. Sorenson is the character worth paying closest attention to, and Dicks clearly understood that because he is the figure on the cover and the emotional core of the narrative. He is not a villain. He is a dedicated scientist who has accepted enormous personal risk in pursuit of something he genuinely believes is right, and that is precisely what makes his arc so effective. He gets contaminated by the antimatter early in the story, and what follows is a slow deterioration that Dicks handles with real care in the prose. His skin begins to emit a dark, unnatural luminescence. His behavior becomes erratic, then dangerous, then something harder to categorize. Dicks calls the transformed state the anti-man, and it's a good name for what's happening because this isn't a conventional monster transformation where a person simply becomes something violent and simple. This is an erasure. Sorenson is being overwritten by a force that is fundamentally incompatible with human coherence. He doesn't become a beast. He becomes a boundary, a place where two incompatible systems are attempting to occupy the same space, and the result is dissolution. Not gore, not shock, just the quiet and mounting dread of watching a person lose the thread of themselves. And the Doctor's response is not to fight him or contain him as a threat. He tries to save him because he recognizes that Sorenson is a casualty of insufficient knowledge rather than of bad intentions. That distinction matters to the story, and it matters to how the Doctor functions as a character. The setting is described as a dense black jungle where the light gets absorbed before it reaches anything useful. It is claustrophobic and disorienting, a place where the standard environmental cues of safety and visibility have been removed entirely. Because this is prose rather than a 1970s television production, your imagination can fill in the details properly. The TV version of this story has its own charm, and I'm not dismissing it, but the budget limitations are visible in ways they simply aren't in the book. Dicks had no budget constraints. He describes the jungle as a place that swallows light and your mind does the rest. The structure is what Doctor Who fans will recognize as the base under siege format, one of the program's most reliable templates. A small group of people confined to a clearly defined space, surrounded by a threat they cannot negotiate with. The ship provides the perimeter. The antimatter beast, this translucent and largely formless entity that moves through the jungle outside, provides the exterior pressure. Commander Salomar provides the interior pressure because he is frightened, and his response to fear is suspicion and escalating aggression. The Doctor and Sarah Jane are caught between the two, which is a position the Doctor occupies fairly often and navigates with characteristic patience. This is where the book earns its place as something more than a competent tie-in novelization. The central question it is asking is whether it is acceptable to take from the universe in order to survive. The Molstrands say yes, obviously, because what is the alternative? The Doctor says the question is considerably more complicated than that. His argument is structural rather than sentimental. The universe operates on equilibrium. The matter and antimatter sides of the boundary exist in balance, and that balance is not decorative, it's functional. If you remove material from the antimatter side, you don't just create a deficit there. You create a corrective force that will move toward you. The antimatter beast is not a creature with intentions or grievances. It is closer to a physical law made visible. It is what happens when you operate inside a system while ignoring the system's terms. Calling it a monster is a category error. It is cause and effect. Sorenson's body makes that argument visible and concrete. He becomes the location where two incompatible forces attempt to coexist, and the outcome is predictable. By the story's end, the Doctor must return everything that was taken and restore the conditions that kept the boundary stable. The stakes are not local. If the boundary fails, both universes are at risk. One thing worth saying to anyone who isn't already a Doctor Who viewer is that this holds up reasonably well as a standalone read. You don't need the mythology, you don't need prior familiarity with the characters, and you don't need any investment in the broader continuity of the show. Dicks was skilled at giving a television script enough internal coherence and atmosphere that it functions on its own terms, and this is one of the better examples of that. The pacing moves efficiently from mystery through investigation to philosophical confrontation to crisis, and the three registers, horror, science fiction, and moral argument, sit alongside each other without crowding. There is also something distinctly British about the fundamental architecture of the situation, and if you've watched the video I did on Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, this will feel immediately familiar. That book is the template. A small group of people cut off from the outside world, being picked off one by one with no help coming and no way out. Christie set it on an island. Dicks sets it at the edge of the universe. The geography changes, but the pressure cooker is identical. Isolated location, dwindling numbers, paranoia spreading through whoever is still standing. The threat in Christie is human and calculated. The threat here is indifferent and cosmic. But the claustrophobic logic that drives both stories is the same, and I'd argue that's not a coincidence. It's a structural instinct that runs pretty deep in British fiction, this idea that civilization is a thin surface, and the moment you remove people from it, what's underneath starts to show. I would put this at 3.5 to 4 out of 5. The premise is solid, the atmosphere is sustained and genuinely effective, and Sorenson is a well-constructed character who gives the story an emotional anchor that keeps the philosophical content from floating away into abstraction. The physics is internal logic rather than hard science, but that has never been what Doctor Who was about, and it doesn't need to be. The moral logic is sound, and it is honestly more resonant now than it probably was in 1975. A civilization consuming resources that belong to a system it doesn't fully understand in order to extend its own survival is not a difficult parallel to locate in the present. What this physical copy adds is something a digital file simply cannot replicate. The age of it, the inscriptions from previous owners, the smell of the pages, the browning at the edges, these things situate any reader within a chain of people who held this same object across 50 years. That is not nothing. There is something particular about reading words that other people read in different decades and different circumstances, and an old paperback carries that history in a way an e-reader never will. If you enjoy science fiction that commits to its ideas and isn't afraid to go dark, find a copy. An old one if you can manage it. Turn off the lights, give it the attention it deserves, and let it take you to the edge of everything. And if you found this useful, or you are just here for the obscure paperback deep dives, a like and a subscribe goes a long way. There is more where this came from.